Hi guys, today we talk about Islamic iconoclasm in India according to Sitaram Goel. Commenting on the history of Central Asia, Heinrich Zimmer writes, during the 6th and early centuries of AD, the whole tract was controlled by Turkish rulers, but in the course of the 7th, with increasing strength of the Tang emperors, China gained control. Finally, however, under the onslaught of Islam from the 8th century to the 10th, both Buddhist and Manichaean as well as the Nestorian Christian culture and monuments of the region were destroyed. Coming to North India, he continues, in the north very little survives of the ancient edifices that were there prior to the Muslim conquest. Only a few mutilated religious sites remain. It is clear from Indian literature that both temples and images must have existed in the 2nd century BC and perhaps earlier. Very little architectural evidence remains, however, antedating the epoch of the Gupta dynasty, AD 322-650, for it was precisely in the Ganges Valley, the central and chief area of the Gupta Empire, that the Muslim Empire flourished a millennium later, and most of the monuments above ground were destroyed by the sectarian zeal of Islam. The oldest stone ruins that have been found represent not the beginning of a style but fully developed forms. He is specific, Sitaram Goel is talking about Zimmer, he is specific about the destruction of Buddhism in India. Since the earliest important body of Indian art surviving to us, he says, stems from the century of Ashoka. It is predominantly Buddhist. During subsequent periods, however, Buddhist and Hindu Brahminical themes alternate in rich profusion. The two traditions flourished side by side, even sharing colleges and monasteries for nearly 2 millenniums until about the height of the Muslim conquest, that is AD 1200. Buddhism disappeared from the land of its birth. You have to remember first of all that Buddhism was not considered to be a separate religion. Buddhism was just dharma. It was part of dharma. It was part of Sanatan dharma. They had their differences only in little nuances of doctrine. Buddhism could be at best called a different sampradaya of Hinduism. Only the British called it a different religion. Before that, no one thought of it as a different religion. By now, there are hundreds of publications which provide detailed studies of the architecture and sculpture of many Hindu monuments from all over India, but only a few of them, mostly written by foreigners, state clearly that what have been studied are heaps of ruins dug out by archaeologists from under telltale mounds. Hindu writers, by and large, leave the impression as if they have studied monuments which stand intact and in all their original majesty. It is only when we come to the plates that the truth dawns upon us. What we find there staring us in the face are mostly ruins with architectural fragments and mutilated sculptures lying scattered on the surface or brought up from underneath. The travels of Buddhist pilgrims from China and the pre-Islamic epigraphic records on stones and copper plates tell us how many temples and monasteries stood at what place and at what time. Histories written by medieval Muslim historians inform us as to who made these monuments disappear and when. The two sources taken together present a total picture which historians have so far studied in separate parts. Hindus are famous or notorious for their poor sense of history, as Christians, Muslims and the modern Westerners understand it. Hindus of medieval India were no exception. They have left no detailed record of what happened to their places of worship and pilgrimage at the hands of Islamic iconoclasm. We do come across descriptions of the Muslim behavior pattern in the Hindu literature from that period. An invariable ingredient of that pattern is the destruction of temples and the desecration of idols. Accounts relating to destruction of particular temples at particular dates and places are very rare. That sort of detailed evidence comes almost entirely from medieval Muslim sources, literary and epigraphic. Archaeological explorations and excavations in modern times have only confirmed and supplemented that evidence. Times have changed, and so also some moral standards of mankind. Religious tolerance is a value which is cherished today universally by the dominant intellectual elite of the world. Muslim theologians, scholars and politicians in present-day India therefore want us to believe that Islam stands for religious tolerance and that there was never a time when it interfered by means of force with the religious beliefs or practices of other people. There isn't any reference whatsoever to the destruction of Hindu temples by Muslim invaders and rulers in medieval India. Leftist scholars and professors and politicians who subscribe to what they describe as secularism dismiss this significant chapter in medieval India's history as a cancard spread by Hindu communalists. As most of these worthies happen to be Hindus by accident of birth, they add considerable weight to Muslim assertions. There was, however, a time not so long ago when Muslim theologians prescribed and Muslim swordsmen practiced the destruction of Hindu temples on a large scale. Hundreds of Muslim historians have credited their heroes with what they rightly regarded as a pious performance according to the principal tenets of Islam. Most of these histories, written in India as well as elsewhere in the Islamic world, have been printed and translated in one or more of the modern languages. They exist in cold print on the shelves of public and private libraries all over the world. Then there are inscriptions in Arabic and Persian which proclaim the destruction of Hindu temples or their conversion into mosques with considerable pride. These too have been deciphered, translated and published by archaeological surveys covering India, Central Asia, Eastern Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. They leave us in no doubt about one of their favorite pastimes of pious Muslim princes in all these countries which constituted at one time the vast cradle of Hindu culture. There are many Muslim monuments all over India which provide unmistakable evidence that materials from demolished Hindu temples have been used in their construction. Most of them carry inscriptions in Arabic or Persian stating when they were built and by whom. Some of these inscriptions proclaim that the mosques in which they stand installed occupy the sites of Hindu temples which were destroyed. Others say that temple materials were used in the construction of the mosques. Similar inscriptions on stone slabs lying loose or not in situ have been discovered in many places. And it is a safe bet that many more inscriptions which refer to destruction of Hindu temples and construction of mosques, etc., remain undiscovered or undeciphered or unpublished. Epigraphists who are entrusted with the decipherment of Arabic and Persian inscriptions have invariably been Muslims. Small wonder that they have been more than slow in presenting evidence which does not add glory to Islam in the eyes of modern men. Epigraphists in secular India have been still less keen or scrupulous in searching and publishing evidence which comprises the picture of this country as a haven of communal amity and peace before the advent of the British. Islamic literary sources provide far more extensive evidence of temple destruction by the Muslim invaders of India in medieval times. They also cover a large area. Islamic literary sources. They also cover a large area from Sinkiang and Transoxiana in the north to Tamil Nadu in the south, and from the Sistan province of present-day Iran in the west to Assam in the east. Okay, there's some footnote, a note to remember. The word Hindu has been used throughout this book to denote all schools of Sanatana Dharma, Brahmanical, Buddhist and Jain. In our own times, however, the words Hindu and Hinduism have been made to mean what they never meant. As we wade through this evidence, we can visualize how this vast area, which was for long the cradle of Hindu culture, came to be literally littered with the ruins of temples and monasteries belonging to all schools of Sanatana Dharma, Bauddha, Jaina, Saiva, Sakta, Vaishnava and the rest. Archaeological explorations and excavations in modern times have proved unmistakably that most of the mosques, mazars, ziyarats and dargahs which were built in this area in medieval times stood on the sites of and were made from the materials of deliberately demolished Hindu monuments. Hundreds of medieval Muslim historians who flourished in India and elsewhere in the world of Islam have written detailed accounts of what their heroes did in various parts of the extensive Hindu homeland as they were invaded one after another. We have had access to only a few of those histories on account of our limitations in terms of language and resources. Most of the histories pertaining to what are known as provincial Muslim dynasties have remained beyond our reach. One thing, however, becomes quite clear from the evidence we have been able to compile, namely that almost all Muslim rulers destroyed or desecrated Hindu temples whenever and wherever they could. Archaeological evidence from various Muslim monuments, particularly mosques and dargahs, not only confirms the literary evidence, but also adds the names of some Muslim rulers whom Muslim historians have failed to credit with this pious performance.